Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Long time no see. As you can tell by the title of this video, I am going to be finally sharing my story time on my labor and delivery experience. First off, a few kind of disclaimers, I guess. One, I want to apologize for my appearance. I'm a new mom, so sorry not sorry. Two, if you hear any noises, it is my son. He is right there. He was sleeping, but now he's awake. What are you doing, little guy? And three, I really hope this lighting is okay. If not, my apologies. I guess it's just this area of my room because the windows are like there and they're not like directly on me, so yeah. I don't want to make this intro too long because this is a very long story, but I will say that if you haven't seen my birth video yet, I will have it linked in the description below. It is my last video that I uploaded like almost 2 months ago. So it all kind of dates back to when I was 37 weeks pregnant approximately. If you watched my hospital bags video and my 37-week bump date, I did mention how my blood pressure was slightly elevated at one of my doctor's appointments, but my next appointment everything was normal and the protein in my urine was normal. I even did a 24-hour urine test where they test the protein over a 24-hour period, and that came back normal. However, I was really swollen one day. August 29th it was. I had to look back. August 29th, I was really swollen. My hands were swollen, my feet and ankles were swollen, but I was always pretty swollen, but that day was really bad. So I had known that my blood pressure was kind of iffy, so around 3 in the afternoon, I took my blood pressure at home and it was like 140/91. And anything over 140/90 is considered not dangerous, but it raises suspicions, I guess, and you should probably call your doctor. So I did, and they wanted me to go in the following day for a blood pressure check. Later that night, before I was going to my boyfriend's house, I got home from the chiropractor and I took my blood pressure and it was 160/100, and I freaked out. I started panicking. So I waited like another hour and I took my blood pressure again and it was still like 144/91. And so I called the on-call doctor and they basically told me to go into the ER just to get checked out because they can't take my readings as an official reading, so they can't label it as high blood pressure. So I went to the ER, I got hooked up to the monitors, they checked him, he was doing fine. My blood pressure was 138/80 something, so you could tell it was coming down, but you could also tell it was spiked before I had gotten there. And also the protein in my urine was at 2.9 and their cutoff is 3.0, so I was right there at the borderline, and that's all they kept telling me that night was, it's borderline, it's borderline. And it was kind of getting aggravated because I'm like, well, is he in danger? Like, am I okay? Is everything fine? Or is this something serious? I had to stay the night for observation. So by the time I got into the room, it was like 11 o'clock at night. And they also wanted to do another 24-hour urine test. So I stayed, from like midnight to midnight. Blood pressure was checked every 4 hours. It was completely normal each time, but because I had started the urine test so late at night, I needed to stay overnight a second night. So now we're going into the morning of August 31st. So the morning of August 31st, the doctor comes in and goes, so good news, your blood pressure is fine. Bad news, your protein is 354, and if you don't know, it can't be above 300, and mine was 354. So she looks at me and she's like, I want to start the induction today. And so me being me, I asked the doctor, I'm like, oh, can I like go home and get some things and, get ready and whatnot? Because I always heard of people like planning inductions, not like, to me this was considered like an emergency induction, I guess. So within the next hour, they had given me some kind of pill that helps to thin out your cervix. And then they also inserted a Foley balloon, which helps dilate your cervix. So they started that, and I ended up getting like a really bad contractions. It was all in my lower back, and it was really like painful to be laying down, because the way it worked was you took the dose, and then for 2 hours you had to be hooked up to the monitor, and then 2 hours off the monitor, and then you come back, you get another dose, 2 hours on the monitor, 2 hours off the monitor. So I did that literally all day and all night. One thing I will mention is that morning when they went to go insert the Foley balloon, I had already naturally dilated to 1 centimeter, so that was exciting, for me at least. So yeah, within a few hours though, the Foley balloon fell out. I had progressed faster than they had thought I would, so I looked at that as like a good sign. And so I ended up dilating to 4.5 centimeters that day. So the next morning on September 1st, I was checked again, and I was 4.5 centimeters dilated and like 40% effaced, I think. They held off on the last dose of the pill, and they said that they were going to send me down to labor and delivery to start Pitocin. This was at like 10:30 in the morning, so I thought I was going like right down within a few hours. Like, I called my parents, my boyfriend calls his parents, we're all excited, and I ended up not going down to like 12:30. So this is where it kind of gets fun a little, I guess. So I go down to labor and delivery, and they get me down there, and my order for Pitocin is not there. So now I gotta wait for them to order the Pitocin, for it to get like checked off or whatever, and then they have to come and give me the Pitocin. So I didn't start the Pitocin until anywhere between like 2 and 2:30 in the afternoon. So if you've ever been induced, or if you haven't, then let me just tell you, you have to be hooked up to the monitor like until the baby comes out, to make sure that they're handling the contractions well and to monitor your contractions. So this was not a fun experience. Then again, I wouldn't trade it for the world, because I will never forget this. They started me on the Pitocin, and the next time I was checked, I was still 4.5 centimeters dilated, but I was like 50% effaced. So I progressed very slowly that day. And then once we got into kind of the night, that's when things started to pick up. And so basically, I was getting strong contractions all throughout the night. And what was so bad was that all of my contractions were like lower back and in my hips. It literally felt as though each contraction I was getting my ribs torn apart. Each contraction was coming like so fast, but they weren't like, that was a burp, but they weren't like regular, so it wasn't considered active labor. So I kept going. I was doing really well. I was walking around. I used this like bouncing rocking chair, which literally saved my life. I, really wanted to go all natural. And since I was being induced, I couldn't really go into a tub or like anything like that. So my whole birth plan just kind of went out the window. So I was like kind of disappointed, but it was whatever. I did get 2 doses of morphine to kind of take the edge off halfway through. so that way I could kind of relax a little bit. At 4 in the morning, I was 5.5 centimeters dilated, like 80% effaced or 90% effaced, and they broke my water, and this was when it got real. The contractions went from like a 10 to like a 15 in pain wise. I tried my best to breathe through them, and then at 8:30 in the morning on September 2nd, they came in and my blood pressure had spiked to like 160 over 100, and it got dangerous. And they said that they recommended getting the epidural to relax my body, because if I didn't and my blood pressure spiked or kept spiking, I ran the risk of having seizures, needing an emergency C-section, him going into distress, something happening to me, and just complications that I didn't want to happen that could be avoided. I agreed to the epidural, and I broke down in tears crying because I really didn't want the epidural. Hey guys, editing Melissa here. Please excuse my appearance. I know I look really crazy. I just wanted to touch on the epidural procedure a little bit. If you hear my son, please ignore him. So basically, when they went to administer the epidural, they gave me a little drink, and I got like half of it down, and then I threw it all right back up, so that didn't go as planned. Then they had me hunched over on the bed, like hugging a beach ball or like hugging my belly, because they just needed me to be hunched over. And then they waited for a contraction to end. Since my contractions were pretty intense and close together, they didn't want to give me any sort of needle in my back while I was getting a contraction. So they waited for the contraction to come down, and then he gave me a numbing shot in my back, which, oh my god, guys, literally hurt like hell. He puts the shot in and I flinched, and if you don't know, flinching or moving while getting an epidural is not good. It can damage your spinal cord and can potentially paralyze you and cause like long-lasting back issues. So the nurse was holding my shoulders down. He's talkative today. The nurse was holding my shoulders down and my boyfriend was holding my hands, and I was just trying to breathe through it, but then I didn't feel the actual epidural catheter go into my spine. However, when he started doing whatever they do, I felt a cold stream go up my spine, and it freaked me out. Literally during this entire procedure, I was crying and screaming. It was probably the most ugliest crying I have ever done. I really didn't want the epidural, but I needed it. So it was definitely not a fun experience, and I definitely never want to get an epidural again unless I have to. So there's that. It felt as if like my legs had gone to sleep. Like if your foot falls asleep and it's like that tingly pins and needles, that is what I felt throughout my legs, and they just felt really heavy. But they put me on my left side and then flipped me to my right side, and I fell asleep. And then I think at like maybe 11:30, I asked to go back to my left side, and then this is where things got fun. They helped me flip over, but when I went from my back and I was about to turn to my left side, as soon as I hit my back, I felt so much pressure down there, and I looked at the nurse and I'm like, I'm pooping myself. And she's like, no, you're not, you're fine. And I look at her and I'm like, if I'm not, then like I'm going to. Like, I kid you not, I feel like I'm gonna shit myself. And she's like, oh no, that's just the baby, like you're good, like he's probably just pushing down. I remember them telling me that don't call for a doctor until you feel constant pressure. And so at this point, I was only feeling the pressure with contractions. And then maybe like a half hour goes by. what was that? And it just keeps getting more pressure, more pressure, more pressure. So I'm sitting there, I'm like, okay, like I think it's time to push. So I told the nurse and she's like, all right, like we'll do some practice pushes, you know, so my boyfriend knew kind of like what to do. The way it worked was each contraction we did 3 pushes. And so we did like the 3rd contraction and we did 1 push, and she's like, you know what, stop, like I'm gonna get the doctor, because literally with each practice push she could see the crown of his head, like he was crowning. And I kid you not, I told them I was literally pushing him out. They said it would take like usually minimum of 2 hours for a first time mom. They called the doctor in. I went through 3 contractions and he was out. I pushed him out in like 13 minutes, which was insane. All it felt was just like a lot of pressure. I really didn't feel any pain. You know, I did get a 2nd degree tear, so I got a few stitches. Now, I don't know if this is all hospitals, but my hospital, if you get the epidural, you can't go into your room until you're able to lift your feet and lift your knees and lift your hips off the table, because you need to be able to transfer beds. And it took me like 3.5 hours maybe until I could do that. So I was just down there just chilling. So that's kind of like my labor and delivery. Honestly, like I can explain it, but nothing in like little details that like I can't even explain like that happened. It's just like amazing. You got the hiccups? I did plan to breastfeed him, so I was doing that. So he was born in the afternoon on the 2nd. We got discharged in the afternoon on the 4th. And between that time, things kind of like went downhill. He, I guess, seemed to be latching properly, but he does this weird thing with his tongue that makes friction with my nipple. And so he literally chewed my nipples up. They were raw, they were like starting to look like bloody, and it became so painful I couldn't nurse him. And so the night before discharge, he was literally up all night crying, and I felt so bad because I was trying to feed him but I couldn't. He got circumcised and it really affected me to see him circumcised, like changing his diaper and seeing him, you know, freshly circumcised. And it just hit me with a load of emotions that I was not prepared for at all. The day of discharge, I had, you know, this really wonderful nurse like talking to me, you know, reassuring me, you know, just letting me just cry it out. But they gave him some formula to calm him down and he stopped crying, and I was like, my child is back. Because he literally was the best baby, like only cried if he needed to be changed or fed. Yeah, you were like a baby. And so to see him like that, I was like, oh my god, I made a mistake. Like I shouldn't have circumcised him. Like what's wrong with him? It was a lot for me. We came home and I became an exclusive pumper. So now I've been exclusively pumping for about 2 months, and he just gets breast milk in bottles. They think he has a milk allergy, so I have been going dairy free for almost 2 weeks now. We have gone through being thrown up on, being pooped on, being peed on, pooping in the bathtub, like everything a first time parent gets to experience. And honestly, it has been a roller coaster. It's been a roller coaster of emotions. Definitely, I will say that it is not easy, but definitely my best advice that I could give to any expecting mom, or any, you know, new mom, is that things are not going to go as planned. And that is my hardest thing, is I plan something and I want it to go as planned, and then it doesn't, and it affects me really badly. And so literally everything that I planned on, besides his name and him being circumcised, went down the drain. My whole birth plan, my breastfeeding journey, everything that I had planned out didn't happen. And I know that things that I plan in the future like aren't going to happen probably. So like my best advice is to know that things are not going to go as planned, but to have a backup plan and to go with the flow. Because in the end, it's all going to be worth it. And as far as postpartum, like, don't be scared to talk about your emotions. There were days I felt like I was a bad mom because my mom was helping, you know, to feed him or change him. And I just felt guilty. You know, I felt like I was his mom. I carried him for 9 months. I need to be his sole provider, and that's just not the case. If people want to help, people can help. After everything that I've been through with the pregnancy and labor and delivery and how painful everything was, I still totally want to have 5 kids. It's just nothing like it. Like, the experience you get, it's just nothing is like it. I'm back. Really quick, I did just want to add in here, because I forgot to mention it while I was filming, that 10 days postpartum, I ended up needing to get my appendix removed. So that was a fun experience. Not. I literally thought that I was having like my uterus exploding, but it just ended up being my appendix. And surprisingly, my appendix, you know, about to explode, was way more painful than my labor. So that says something. But yeah, so I came home from the hospital after getting my appendix out, and I felt worse than after I had just had a baby. So that really sent me into a downward spiral, but luckily with time I recovered fine and I'm all good now, and I don't gotta worry about my appendix. But next time I do gotta worry about my gallbladder, because that tends to be something fairly common after having a baby. So there's that little update. I'm sure I'm probably leaving out like some details, but it honestly was such a long experience that I don't think I can cover every little detail, and this little guy's getting fussy. So that is pretty much my labor and delivery story time. There's a little update on postpartum. Then I guess really quick, I'll show you guys my belly 2 months postpartum, because it's real, it's raw. So yeah, let me put this guy down. Fair warning. So here is my belly 2 months. Yeah, so I did gain a lot of weight, but I also did lose a lot of weight. A lot of weight gain was because of him, but also swelling. I was swollen so bad and I didn't even realize it. There's my story time. I hope it makes sense. I hope maybe it gives some insight. I know I wanted to make this because my actual birth video, the birth of my son video, didn't really give a lot of detail, and so this kind of just explains how my labor and delivery experience went. And so, like I said, it was a very huge, long, kind of traumatizing experience, but I would totally do it again, and I wish I could do it again, but I don't plan to have another baby till like 2 years. So thank you guys for watching. Make sure you like this video and be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time in my next video. Bye!